Good morning. Let's talk about cortisol. We have talked about estrogen, which is a sex hormone. We've talked about insulin, which is a metabolic hormone. And cortisol, just like all these other hormones, is so, especially in modern times, so crucial to understand because it's the hormone that basically helps you manage your stress. And who can say, which one of us can say today that we don't feel stress? Every single person I know that every single one of you watching is experiencing some level of stress, some more than others, some less than others, some more intense than others. And it can be really frustrating when you know you're going through stress and you're feeling unwell. And let's say you have, you're exhausted, you're tired, you're irritable, you're cranky. You just feel like everything is off with you. And you go to the doctor and he runs all the tests, he does all the things, and everything comes back normal. And the doctor just says to you, well, it's probably just stress. You're probably just too stressed. Go home and try to relax. Go home and stress less. Okay. So, I mean, that's easier said than done, right? Like, what do you mean go home and stress less? I'm going to go home to the same situations and the same stress triggers and the same things that create stress in my life. And how does this stress, how is it making me sick? So they only give you sort of part of the answer. They don't give you the full answer. Definitely, they don't give you the solution. So always, as I'm always going to be doing in my videos and as I do in my programs, you need to become a critical thinker and not just take anything that's given to you at face value. You need to dig deep. You need to understand the root causes. You need to understand how is stress creating sickness in my body? Why is stress making me feel the way that I'm feeling? And what can I actually do about it besides go home and, theoretically stress less? So just like every single other hormone is produced in an organ in your body, cortisol is produced in something called your adrenal glands. If you put your hands on your waist like this, and where your kidneys are, so like where your thumbs hit the back of your waist right here, that's where your kidneys are. And on top of each kidney, you have something called an adrenal gland. And these adrenal glands are what produce cortisol, as well as adrenaline and some other hormones related to stress as well. But we'll focus on cortisol today. Every single time that you are presented with a stressful situation in your life, whether it's actually stressful or you perceive it as stressful, your body's going to pump cortisol to help you deal with this situation. And the ways that we deal with when we're faced with external stress triggers is either we're going to face it, or we're going to flee it, or we're going to freeze, or we're going to fawn. We have four basic stress responses: fight, flee, fawn, or freeze. So you're either going to run away from the source of the stress and do nothing about it, or you're going to face it head on and fight it, or you're going to freeze, you're not going to know what to do, or you're going to fawn, which is basically, pretend like nothing is happening and be all nice and sweet and try to smooth over the situation. So those are the external stress triggers, and those are your potential responses to the stress triggers. And each time that you have one of these responses, your adrenal glands are going to pump cortisol to help you deal with that situation. And you can those situations, like when you're in a stressful situation, when you have pressure at work, or you have an argument with your spouse, or somebody says something you don't want to hear, or you find yourself in any situation you don't want to be in. You can recognize those responses in yourself, and everybody knows themselves. I'm somebody who's going to answer right back. I'm just going to leave the situation, or somebody's going to pretend like nothing is happening, or somebody's just going to not know what to do. We all, if you're being really honest with yourself, how you respond to those external stress triggers. What we don't recognize is that cortisol also responds to internal stress triggers. And by that, I mean anything that is happening inside your body that you're not aware of. And that's because cortisol, the purpose behind cortisol is it's the hormone that was created to help you stay in a state of what we call homeostasis, which is balance in the body. It's basically the hormone that's there when it helps you deal with stress, whether external or internal. It's so that to keep you calm on the inside, to make sure that your insides are not overcharged, that they're not overworking, that they're not becoming infected, that there isn't an issue. So it works when it's triggered both externally and internally. If we look back to, the first man was like 100,000 years ago, 200,000 years ago, right? Basically, same as us, physiologically, biologically, same organs, same hormones, same everything. What were their stress triggers? So they lived in the wilderness, they lived in caves, they needed to go out and hunt and get, their food every once in a while. Maybe they got into like a little argument with the tribe next door. So the instances where their body needed to produce cortisol to save them were not a lot. Like if they got chased by one of the animals that they were hunting, right? Or if, they got into an argument with one of the tribes next door, or got into a war. It wasn't a daily occurrence that the body had to continuously produce cortisol to bring down the levels of stress in the body. It was every once in a while, maybe even once every 2 weeks, once every 3 weeks. In our modern day lives, we don't have to go out hunting. We don't have the threat or the danger of being chased by an animal. And most of us don't have the threat of being, living in a war zone. But our modern day lifestyles, your body and your adrenal glands and the way your body responds, we are going to react to our modern day stressors in exactly the same way that our body used to react to being chased like by a lion, or having to fight the tribe next door. The body's going to react in exactly the same way. So if you have a stressful day and you wake up and you have an argument with your spouse, and then you go to work, and then your boss is being really difficult, and you have a deadline, and then you have to run back home and pick up the kids and then drive them to practice and then bring them home and then do their homework and then and it's just continuously, you just feel like you are fighting all day long. That is the equivalent to you being chased by a lion 15 times a day. You're going to be exhausted because every single time you're confronted with a modern day stress trigger, whether it's an actual stress trigger or you just perceive it as a stress on you, your body's going to pump cortisol to try and calm you down every single time. So think about your day. Think about how many times. And you can feel that pressure building up inside you when you feel stressed. Think about how many times that happens to you every single day, whether it's at home with your family and your spouse and your kids, whether that's, in traffic trying to get to work, whether that's at work with your boss or your colleagues or deadlines, whether that's with other family members, whether you're going through sadness or trauma or grief. All of those are reasons for your body to pump cortisol to help you get through those situations. And then every single time you consume an inflammatory food, that's also, but you don't see that response happening, and you don't even know that that's happening. So every single time you take in one of the inflammatory foods I keep listing for you, your body's also going to have an equal cortisol response to that food, because that's a stress. It's an internal stress on the body. When you're drinking alcohol and caffeine and processed foods and sugars and cakes and cookies and sweets and sodas and artificial foods and sweeteners, and you're not eating enough of the foods that nourish the body, that's an internal stress trigger, because internally your body is suffering. And what is cortisol? Its job is to make sure that it maintains balance in your body. So it's going to keep pumping the cortisol to help you out, to put the flames out. This is why in modern day medicine, they've created the synthetic version of cortisol, which is cortisone. So like if you have a sudden infection or something happens to you and they need to quickly sort of save you and quickly bring your body back to balance, what do they give you? They give you a cortisone injection. It's a synthetic form of this incredibly powerful God-made hormone, which is cortisol. So cortisol, like all your hormones, is your friend. It's there to help you. It's there to balance your body. It's there to put out the flames. It's there to make sure you don't get sick. But as with anything else, when you keep overloading it, so when you keep exposing yourself to stressful triggers, and when you keep exposing your body to internal stress triggers through the foods that you're eating, imagine being chased by a lion 20 times a day. 30 times a day. If you calculate coffee first thing in the morning, then you get into traffic, and then you get to work, and then you have a deadline, then your job is being annoying, then you come back home and you have an argument with your spouse, or your spouse is not supportive, or your kids are being difficult, and you have to make food, nobody wants the food that you ate, then you have to clean up, and then you have to help the kids with homework, then you have to get the kids to bed, nobody's happy with anything that you're doing, then you have to get up again the next day and do it all over again. Imagine how exhausted you would be if you were being chased by a lion by every single stress trigger. And in between all of those, you're having coffee, you're having a melted cheese sandwich, you're having chips, you're having another coffee, you're having a croissant, you're too tired to make food, so you make pasta. Every single one of those is going to elicit a cortisol response from your body, which means you're going to be exhausted. And that's one of the main symptoms of excess cortisol in the body is exhaustion. You might have heard of something called adrenal fatigue. That's when your adrenals have been pumping cortisol for so long, they literally get worn out. They can't do it again. So exhaustion, high blood pressure, thinning hair. If your body is not taking in enough energy from its food, guess what hormone has to jump in to give you that burst of energy? Cortisol. And the biggest sign of a cortisol imbalance is, let's say you really haven't done anything different with the way that you're eating, whichever way that you're eating. You really haven't done anything differently in the past while. And whether you exercise or not, you also haven't done anything differently, but you notice that your midsection is getting bigger. And you know you really haven't changed anything. You're not really eating more or eating differently. You're not exercising more, exercising less, but for some reason, it just keeps getting bigger. Or maybe you do try to exercise more. Maybe you do try to fix how you're eating, but you might see changes in other parts of your body, but this one midsection stays the same. That's called a cortisol belly. This is your biggest sign that your body is fighting excess cortisol. The amazing news, of course, is that you can literally begin tomorrow to bring down your cortisol levels by changing how you eat. The way that you react to your external trigger, that's going to take a bit longer. That takes, mindset work, that takes understanding yourself, understanding your thought process, understanding the person in front of you, the situation you're dealing with. That's more of a long-winded process. But in terms of bringing down the cortisol spikes from what you're eating, and that's huge. You can start doing that today if you want. And this is what I help you do in the program. We work on removing all of these inflammatory foods that not only cause problems with your sex hormones, like your estrogen and your periods and your fibroids and your endometriosis and all of those reproductive issues, and not only brings down insulin so that you balance your blood sugar issues, but also balances cortisol, because the body is one big, intricate, a detailed system that is connected. It's not separate. Your insulin doesn't work separate from your cortisol, doesn't work separate from your sex hormones, doesn't work separate from your thyroid. It's all connected. And your hormones all need to work sort of like a symphony. When one of them is out of tune, it's like a domino effect and the rest of them will follow. And it doesn't take much for one of them to play slightly differently in order to result in a change and have the rest of them also malfunction, even if slightly. So we need to balance them all. And luckily, it's the same foods that cause the problems in insulin as they do in estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, as they do in cortisol, as they do in your thyroid hormones. So the first and easiest step to doing anything, you don't need the supplements, you don't need the gimmicks, you don't need the cortisol drinks, you don't need all the 1,000,001 things. The first and most basic thing to do to bring your body and all of these hormones back to balance is to remove the toxicity from the inflammatory foods and replenish the deficiency with incredibly nutrient-dense foods. That's it. That's all you have to do. And that's exactly what I show you how to do in the hormone detox. So if you want details about it, or if you have specific questions about your health or related to any one of these hormones, go ahead and message me or email me today, and let's have a chat about what's happening with you and get you started. Have a great day.